of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 31 after the hour. We are here at the home of Kyle Vogt with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Thanks for having us out here, Kyle.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, and let's talk about how you got involved with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. What's your law enforcement background?
Well, I went in the military to be military police, and my goal was to be a military police officer and then go into civilian law enforcement. What happened was, after serving in the military and seeing politics, I just decided I didn't want to go into that direction. So that led me into a different career path, but that was what made me want to be in law enforcement. Spent 4 years military police. I was on a hostage rescue team. I did weapons instruction, etc. We had quite a few busts, such as we do DUIs, we do security checkpoints. We'd also had domestics, pretty much like every other police officer. And I had that experience, and I really loved serving, but what I don't like today is what the drug war has done is it's changed from serving to protect your community to then going out now and doing something that's actually harming your community via the black market and drug war, which we'll discuss momentarily. But that was my introduction to law enforcement. I went military police to pre-train myself, kind of harden myself, give myself a better foundation, then be a civilian cop, because my idea was I was going to go after bad guys. I mean, bad people. And I wanted to be a pretty tough dude so I could take care of these people. But I never believed I'd be going and harassing people and just trying to get people on drugs, especially like today with teenagers. Mm-hmm. And every time a cop pulls a kid over, at least the ones I talk to, first thing the police ask them is, do you have drugs in the car? And I'm just saying, when I looked at cops growing up as a kid, we respected them. So I wanted to be in the military and I wanted to be a cop, and I had that respect, and that changed with the drug war. So that's a long answer, short question.
Was there much, did you have much experience or much to inform your opinions about the drug war when you were doing military policing? Is that an emphasis in the military?
Well, where I served in 3 different locations. I did physical security. So I was in a program that was very particular. It's called a PRP program. We dealt with nuclear, biological, chemical. So we had to always be maintaining a high security clearance. And the interesting thing I noticed is we would have common problems with alcohol abuse. We'd have guys getting DUIs, and that's just not acceptable when you're in military police. Sure. So we had a lot of people physically doing things that you were obviously aware they had a problem. But what's interesting to notice is that the only guys who ever got chaptered out of the military for other drug use, it was marijuana. And it was only through a drug screen, a random drug screen. Right. So we had soldiers who were great soldiers, great marksmen, everything's great. And all of a sudden, one day, we find out they've been smoking marijuana and they get chaptered out. So we really didn't have a lot of issues with illicit drugs where we were, because we're in a more particular branch of the military. But we did see quite a bit of problems with alcohol all the time. I mean, we'd go to the officers club, the NCO clubs, domestics, DUIs, you name it. We had alcohol was the number one thing. Actually made a lot of money through DUIs because we were on federal land and we enforced state and local laws. But it was very interesting, very little issues with drugs in general, mostly alcohol. And sadly, I saw a lot of good soldiers end their careers early because of a random test. And the only evidence was in that test. No behavioral issues, right. No indications. So in answer to your question, that was probably my experience was mostly on the road and dealing with DUIs and such as that.
So you get out of the military, you're wanting to go into policing, but what is it that changed when you get out? Did you see that, wait a minute, we're just busting drug people?
Well, what really happened is I also, the pay scale is very poor for starting out law enforcement. So that was a factor too. So let's move forward a little bit. What happened was, say about 5-6 years ago, my son happened to get arrested for simple possession. Now, knowing that his father was very straight-laced, former military police, et cetera, he didn't want to come and tell me that he had been arrested. Mm-hmm. This is how I found out about LEAP. And this is how I found out that we have a criminal justice system that's anything but just. So my son, I have twin sons, and this one son, I get a call, and he's asking me if I'm alone. I find out he's arrested in jail. Okay, I'm going to bail him out. And then I found out it's a violation of probation. I know he'd been prior arrested. When I went in, met with his PO, the first thing out of that PO's mouth was, Mr. Vogt, your son didn't do anything wrong. He's not a criminal. He just did something stupid, You got caught, and it's all about money. And I'm sorry to tell you that. My jaw about hit the ground. An honest PO. And let me just tell you this. Because I had my background knowledge and I happen to have known a former judge, I wrote a letter to that judge, reasoning with this judge, telling him if you enforce adjudication, this person, then what's going to happen? You're going to screw his life up. He'd have mandatory 1-year suspension driver's license, no future college assistance, blah, blah, blah. I was able to get that all withheld.
Wow.
And the PO actually worked with me and the judge, et cetera. Now, that's a rare case.
Yeah.
But what about all these young kids who don't have someone to write that letter, who have that now getting on their record? Because we have a saying in LEAP, you can live with an addiction, but you can't live with a conviction. That conviction is going to follow you everywhere the rest of your life. And what a lot of people don't realize is you lose college assistance just for a drug offense. Rapists and murderers can still get college assistance. Mm-hmm. That's insane.
Yeah. So if you got a drug problem, the last thing you want is an education. What?
Yeah. No, you're stupid, right? But I mean, that was my introduction to, that brought me in contact with LEAP because I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. And then when I called the Attorney General's office, off the record, one of the people worked there was telling me about her son being in the system, and it was designed to keep you in. When I asked the PO, and this is an interesting thing, my son had 6 months probation. He was on his 5th month, and I said, now he's got a little time left. Why did you violate him? He said, if we didn't violate him, we'd lose him. This way we get another $200 fine, cost of probation, all these court fees. It's about money. Mm-hmm. I could not believe this. I had been living in a fantasy world thinking that if we arrest somebody, the judge is going to sit up there, listen to the officer's going to be honest, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, see, my view was that's why I was willing to serve. I mean, I'm not trying to toot my horn, but serving is something, it's a sacrifice.
Sure.
Well, if I'm going to wear that pistol and take that risk, I just feel if I'm going to set a standard, I should live that standard. Mm-hmm. And we pretty much did as MPs, at least the guys I work with. So when I would see the stuff that I do today and see the corruption, where, for example, this officer lied in the report. He said my son was driving. What happened? They couldn't go in the one apartment, so they went and sat in their car and they're hotboxing it. Uh-huh. He drove by and saw them. A detective pulled him over, wrote a citation, notice to appear. I read the report, and he said he saw them pulling into the parking lot. That could have been a DUI or driving under influence, whatever. But the fact is, why lie in your report? And I know my son enough to know, and I read the report and everything to tell who's lying.
Right.
And it wasn't me just being an ignorant father and believing my son, but I couldn't believe that what I was seeing, the corruption, it was just shocking. And so as I began digging further and further, I began seeing more and more. And I said, I can't sit back here. I've got to do something about this. And I had always been ultra conservative, and I never believed in locking people up for smoking pot. I smoked a ton of it as a teenager, grew up in Hawaii, and then I stopped. Hadn't smoked it since, I'm in my late 40s now. So I never really believed in locking people up, but I thought drugs, absolutely. I lock those people up. They're dangerous. And then the one day I started seeing this black market issue, and that's with LEAP. The whole concept is not just marijuana. We're very pro anything to go in the right direction, but all drugs. The reason why is there's a black market. That's where the crime and violence comes from. You know, as a soldier, I was willing to take up a rifle and engage another human, but I didn't want to do it unnecessarily. And who would pick a war? Who would go to fight if you didn't have to? And yet in our country, we're fighting every day. We're causing a war because we made a choice. We've chosen the policy of prohibition rather than a policy of regulation control and the resulting black market that's coming out of it. And we've created that, and we can disable it and take it out just by the stroke of a pen. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We don't have to fire a single round. I was on a SWAT team, and when you train that way, you want to get in a fight. You want to use your tools, your training. I mean, it sounds messed up, but that's our mentality. Mm-hmm. Why would you send those guys in with those weapons if you didn't have to?
And that segues to the point, and Radley Balco reports on this better than anyone, the rise of the warrior cop, this over-militarization of our domestic police forces. And you talk about SWAT. SWAT was invented in the late 60s, early 70s to deal with hostage situations and terrorist plots. Absolutely. And now we're serving warrants with it.
Absolutely. That's something amazing, because I was on what's called SRT, Special Response Team. I was on it for a year. Our SOP, for those who don't know, Standard Operating Procedure, was if one of our road units, if we had a call, if there was a situation, he responded to that, it was outside his general scope of operations, domestic, hostage situation, whatever, then he'd call us in. Now, we'd be on standby, but we were only to go in if a life was at jeopardy. In other words, We knew when we go in locked and loaded, we had MP5 SD3s, so they're built-in, suppressed, fully automatic, capable weapons. And I mean, we could put 2 shots in the head at 50 meters, no problem. So when we go in, we're going in loaded for bear because we're expecting a fight, and we believe you put 10 against 1. You don't give the odds in their favor, you put them in your favor. But it's for a serious situation. And our rules were if we even wounded the perpetrator, the subject, that was not considered a successful mission. If one of our hostages went down, oh, that's it. One of our team members, we're supposed to go in there and be surgically precise, no casualties. That was the goal. Now, we only went in when the stuff was hitting the fan. Today, I can't believe what I see. I see SWAT teams going in for nonviolent situations. There's no history of violence, or no knowledge of weapons, no reason for them to think, other than there's a lot of pot plants in that place. But I guess we made those pot plants so valuable by the black market via prohibition. But it's insane. We take a tool that had good use and we abuse it. And that's what's happened today. And that's another thing about LEAP. We not only want to end prohibition of all drugs to get rid of the crime and violence, and then allow addicts to actually get treatment and have a life, but we want to restore respect for law enforcement because it's been lost through the drug war.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a big point to me as well. And I appreciated how you talked about wanting, respecting cops when you grew up. I remember watching 1 Adam 12, 1 Adam 12, and had the
Absolutely.
same idea that was,
Right.
They were going to get the bad guys, and they were going to protect us. And I think the erosion of respect for law enforcement, especially among young people and especially among communities of color, is one of the worst aspects of this drug war.
Oh, absolutely. I have several friends who tell me that every time they're pulled over, just because they're of color, mandatory. Do you have any drugs in the car? Can I search your car? And I say, and you don't let them, right?
Yeah, right. I say no.
But it's like, I just can't believe, when I was growing up, I knew the neighborhood cop's name. His name was Scotty. I remember him to this day. He was a detective. The reason I remember him, because he egged his car one day. And I got busted by him. But, here's the thing. We had parties. We'd be out there drinking, smoking pot, doing whatever. They'd come to the party and say, hey, guys, party's over. Shut off your amps. Break it up. Dump that out. Who's driving? You're not. Get the heck out of here. If we see you again, we're going to take your asses here and we're calling your dad. And we were like, okay, we respect them. We didn't go back. We knew where we could, what we could do, where we could do it. We knew kind of the boundaries, and they respected us. They were like guys who we would call because this guy was knifed or something bad. Today, the cops are the last ones you want to call. I mean, I'm sad to say, I'm former law enforcement. I have the greatest respect. I know the risks that those guys take and how underpaid they are and how it interferes with the family life. I understand that. But, I mean, I didn't think wearing a badge made me above anybody else. I was there to make people safe. That was my view. These cops come in and they have attitudes and they don't understand anything about protecting and serving. And what's happened is the drug war has corrupted that because it's all about the quotas. It's all about the drug bust. It's all about, also, an amazing thing is your training. It dehumanizes. Police are routinely taught in their academies that people who use drugs are low life, they're terrible people, they're prone to this or that. So you have this image of anybody who uses drugs in any level, rather than one guy who smokes a little puff to a heroin addict, they're all the same, they're all bad, they're all dangerous, and just who cares if you hurt them, get in the car. I mean, I understood when I was taking a drunk, if we're putting in the car and he's belligerent, I don't care if he gets his head bumped as he gets in there, because he's the one choosing to do that, right? I'm not saying that you can abuse people, but that happens. I mean, you don't want to be treated bad, don't treat people badly. But cops today I don't know, they go off the top. When I talk to young people, which is quite often, they tell me, cops always ask me, you have drugs in the car, they feel harassed, they feel intimidated. There's no respect for law enforcement almost whatsoever in what I see. And I'm not just seeing in young people, I'm seeing people my age, doctors, physicians, because they look at it and they say, if you're enforcing the law, and then you have a double standard. If you're supposed to be honest, right? Honest people catching criminals, there's some honesty, I think, in there somewhere. Then why would you lie? In court, why would you lie about drugs? Why would you do the things you do? Now, I've got off subject a little bit, but going back to the point is the interaction with law enforcement when I was growing up, like you said, 1 Adam 12, they were respectful. I wanted to be like them because they didn't treat people badly. They were decent. In fact, I saw them rescue people. I mean, the cops I knew rescued people drowning when I was surfing. So my idea of being a cop was I was there to catch a thief, somebody who carjacked, those kind of things. Not if you were smoking something. What we cared about is not what you put in your body. It's how you behave and what happens when you get behind the wheel and you drive down the road. You're putting others at risk. That's my duty. So the whole idea is law enforcement needs to, at LEAP, we want to redirect the focus of law enforcement back onto making our communities safer by removing violent offenders. I'll give you an example. I don't know, it was quite some time ago, a guy named Ted Bundy up in Jacksonville, a serial murder, was on the loose. And those communities were in terror, especially anyone who had a daughter up there. Now, I have a daughter going to college, and I can understand that. And when they caught him, there was a great sigh of relief because he confessed to all the crimes. They knew they had the guy. Guess what? There are no more murders. Well, when they take a drug dealer off the street, what happens? He's gone. Next guy, next guy, next guy. All they're doing is taking people off and filling up the jails and giving more opportunities for a new entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And all we have to do, and I think, what was that? Didn't we end prohibition back, what was that, 1930? Oh, yeah. And what, it took us all of 13 years to realize that? And here I am in my late 40s, and we're still dealing with this. And the amazing thing is, I talk to teachers, there's no alcohol being sold in schools. When I was a teenager in high school, that's where I sold my weed and picked it up, and we did that stuff. And we wanted to buy beer, we'd say, hey, if I give you $5, you buy me a, oh, darn it. It was difficult. You know why? Because people wanted to be careful with kids. They're like, okay, you're 18, I could see you can drink. You know, the age then was 18. Right. But what I'm saying is there's laws that people respect. And when people don't respect the laws, they don't abide by those laws. Yeah. And people are starting to see that prohibition is not a respectable thing, just as we found out with alcohol.
Absolutely. Well, folks, it's copssaylegalizedrugs.com or leap.cc. You can follow Cops Say Legalize on Twitter. And Kyle Vogt, thank you for your service, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Hey, when we come back, we got time for a radical rant. We're going to talk about Project Sam, Kevin Sabet trying to spin Sanjay Gupta. It ain't going to happen, folks. I'm right here to take him down. We'll be right back after this.